Thank you very much, Mr. Matare. And I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the government officials that have already joined us. I see the Chief Director for Industrialization from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. I would also like to recognize the CZI principals, the President and the Vice Presidents. I would also like to recognize the CZI National Council, our colleagues from business. I would also like to recognize the diplomatic community that has joined us. We do have the British Embassy here, or FCDO. We also have the Japanese ambassador already here with us. I know the Canadian ambassador is also coming, but I'm not quite sure whether they are here already. I would also like to recognize one of our key supporters who has been supporting CZI dialogue activities as well as our conferences for quite a few years now, and some of the work that we do. This is the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, represented by Anna here. I think she's in the room, so she's at the back of the room. I think we really need to give them a big round of applause. I make this this announcement because I think they've seen probably what a lot of donors sometimes fail to see, that some things don't fit in a log frame. But when we work with the organizations that are close to the action, we can trust that a difference will be made and that value will be created by the support that they give. So they've given us room to shape what we do. They've really taken a demand-driven approach, which is responsive to how and what we would like to do as the Confederation, and responded to that and have not boxed us in any log frame that says, we can only support something that fits in this Y and the X box in a certain way. And we have seen that the support that they've then extended to us has enabled us to cover quite some ground. And some of it includes some of the key research we did a couple of years ago, which was further presented at the just ended ZCon conference with the Minister of Finance in the Victoria Falls. And this is very commendable, and the CZI, we are very grateful for this support, as it were. So thank you again to Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I hope I say that right. So I will come to our opening remarks about the conference, and once again would like to thank the members of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, the collective that is business, and the collective that is the Confederation, who make up CZI, as it were. They've come through to us in terms of sponsorship support, just to make sure that this conference actually takes off and is funded and well provided for. But also they've recognized and responded to our call when we said the sponsorship that we are asking for is basically meant to support some of our capital expenditure in the Confederation. And for that, we are really grateful. We are a subscription-based organization, and we are able to run our operations from our subscriptions. But this extra support during times like this does enable us to fund some of the capital expenditure that we may have from time to time. So I would again request a round of applause to our members in this room. Thank you. So as we go to the conference theme itself, it's stated as glocalize. I will just summarize that we are recognizing that there's nothing local about being local anymore. And it's high time that we rise to the occasion, because whether we like it or we don't, we are playing in the global league, as it were. So this is the genesis or the origins of the theme that we came up with. We also recognized and responded to input and feedback from members who also were expressing that they need business leadership related content, and their success cases that we are going to hear from that have deployed these business models for years, and what this has done to their businesses. But we are also then going to interrogate what does this mean for industrialization? What does this mean for innovation? What does this mean for entrepreneurship development? And what does it mean for our competition laws and policies? And what does it mean for policy in general? So that is going to be a very key part of our discussions, as you are aware that, we make an example over the past few days that, in the cotton to clothing value chain, for example, certain parts of that value chain who are operating in a singular node of the value chain are actually beholden to another node of the value chain performing. If it doesn't perform, they can't operate. And you can't force those value chains to actually then make sure that you've got your supplies. We have seen it in the cooking oil industry, and we have now seen that there is movement towards contract farming and the participation of private sector in primary production. We have seen it in dairy, we have seen it in various things. So we thought it was an important conversation for us to have. We are also going to be talking about the emerging global dynamics and global issues, be it around the geoeconomics or geopolitics, and various other global developments that may affect Zimbabwean business. We are also going to be talking about funding and funding innovation, really exploring some of the gaps we have and whether our development partners and the financial sector can we put our heads together and craft solutions that are responsive to the gaps that we see. And this is going to come from a key presentation that will be made today by our Chief Economist, Dr. Cornelius Dube, from CZI. And of course, we will wrap up with the policy discussion with our policymakers on Friday. So this is basically the rundown of the conference. Our hope is that we are going to walk away with business decision-making information, as well as with policy input information, which we will utilize in taking our policy engagements forward, and also in taking our engagements with each other as business forward, as it were. I think while I'm standing here, I know that we have had a bit of a slow start, and this is always the risk with events in Harare, because people start with other things and then they come to the conference. We would also really like to make this call for those that are not yet official members of the Confederation to consider joining the Confederation. We've got a team that is outside and ready to assist you in that regard. I think at this point I should also highlight one of the aspects of our conference. We always hear from each other in a lot of conferences where we hear from ourselves, and what we tried to do was to bring in different voices from different parts of the world to infuse their knowledge, their experience, and their expertise with ours, so that we can come up with discussions and also maybe conclusions that will help us to take our work forward. So we do have some international speakers who have come into the country, and again, courtesy of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, we have kindly supported their travel to be here with us. And part of the key elements of our program are the intimate networking sessions with these individuals. You will see, if you scan your program, You will notice that we have some scheduled networking sessions that you are free to make a booking and secure a place. I'm not quite sure how those bookings are looking, but that is the arrangement that we have. And of course, some of them, you will be able to interact with them as the program progresses. Then I would like also to make a special announcement and to acknowledge and recognize our visitors from Rwanda. CZI last year went into a memorandum of understanding with the Rwanda Private Sector Federation, who are here on a trade and investment mission. They have a 30-person strong delegation that is here and attending the CZI Congress. They are exhibiting some of their products here. And I would like to extend a special welcome to the president of the Rwanda Private Sector Federation, Mr. Bafakulera. I'm not quite sure if he's in the room or he's still outside, but I've seen some of the Rwanda delegation already at the premises here. So we are very grateful for this collaboration. But what I can highlight to our members is that the Rwanda business people are looking for joint venture opportunities. They are looking for source markets. They're also looking for end markets for their products. We already have a few Zimbabwean companies that are already set up in Rwanda. So Rwanda presents also an opportunity for the internationalization of Zimbabwean businesses. I know Teachers Furnitures is there. Maka Irrigation have already gone. I'm sure there are a few others. I know Sidco is sort of there, I think. And a few companies that I may not have been able to mention here. So feel free, they are here over the next 3 days to interact and to explore opportunities. So thank you very much once again for coming.
Honorable Minister for Industry and Commerce, Dr. CZI Nzenza, the President of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, the Chief Executive Officer of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, distinguished guests, colleagues, allow me to stand on the protocols already established in the interest of efficiency. I'm a person who works in a factory, and in factories we look for efficiency. I've been given a very small amount of time, so I'm going to get straight to the point and invite the President of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, Mr. Kurai Macheza, to give us his opening remarks. Thank you.
Usisa is taller than me, so I must adjust this. Good morning to you all. Minister of Industry and Commerce, Dr. CZI Nzenza, Japanese Ambassador to Zimbabwe, His Excellency Satoshi Tanaka, His Excellency the French Ambassador Roro Chavelot, His Excellency, Her Excellency British Embassy Melanie Robinson, Canadian Embassy Christina Buchan, the Rwanda Ambassador James Musoni. That one is easy, is one of us. Minister of Industry and Commerce Permanent Secretary Dr. Mavis Sivanda, Chief Director Industry and Commerce Maima Kombe, Senior Government Officials, CEO of CZI, all CZI members, past presidents, members of National Council, members of the media fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, a good morning to you all. I would like to start by welcoming you all of you to 2022 edition of our annual Congress, which we have aptly themed Glocalize. By this, we are simply merging the imperatives of globalization and localization to assume a sense of simultaneous universalization and particularization in the way we do business and policy in our economy. The COVID pandemic and its resultant impact globally did not spare us, and the impact is still unfolding in most cases. The Russian-Ukraine war came with global impact, which again we immediately felt. The global trade agenda and the global trade agreement that come with it are beckoning. The various bilateral trade agreements and other business and investment arrangements we enter into are with countries that have a different levels of adaptation and advancements towards the global ideals. Digital advancements have meant that the world has become more and more borderless. Over and above all this, regional and continental integration is accelerating. In the economy, we have local, regional, and global companies whose origins are here and beyond our borders. I'll also repeat what I've said in other fora when the world rankings are done. For example, competitiveness, economic or product complexity, ease of doing business, corruption, innovation, education, human development, economic development. For us, an upper middle income is an upper middle income as defined by the per capita GDP global. We cannot have our own definition of it. And if you are aiming for it, our policy and business ambitions have got to match that goal. The deliberations over the next 3 days should draw us closer to the realization of the building blocks that we need to inform both business and policy for a prosperous society, and will shape the work of the Confederation in the same regard. I wish you all fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
Director of Ceremonies, Mr. Busisa Moyo. The Chairperson of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Industry and Commerce, Honorable Sako, would like to recognize the presence of His Excellency Satoshi Tanaka of the Embassy of Japan, and also recognize His Excellency Ambassador James Musoni, the Embassy of Rwanda, and also His Excellency the Ambassador of France, His Excellency Rollo Chablo. I'm told, and I cannot see them from where I'm standing, but it's Her Excellency Christina Bakken from Canada, and also Her Excellency Melanie Robinson, the Ambassador to the UK. And I'm very pleased to see the ambassadors here, because we just have not been seeing them much during the COVID era, which was understandable, but now that we don't have masks and we can see each other, I'm very much looking forward to re-engagement with the ambassadors from various countries. I must also acknowledge the presence of the Secretary of Industry and Commerce, Dr. Mavis Banda. Other secretaries here present. The President of the Confederation of Zimbabwean Industries, Mr. Macheza. So the Chief Executive Officer of CZI, Ms. Sekai Kuvarika. CEOs
of business membership organizations who are here present, international guest speakers, captains of industry, members of the media. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my honor and pleasure to address you at this year's Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, CZI Annual Congress. It is my second time to do this. I was here last year, so it's very exciting to see the changes, positive changes that we are witnessing today. I would therefore like to thank CZI for inviting me for the second time. I also note that at this gathering, there's the presence of international speakers from South Africa, Germany, Singapore, UK, United States, and of course, our respected ambassadors from the different countries. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's annual Congress is running under the theme, Glocalize. The theme is most certainly aligned to His Excellency, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa's vision to implement the national development goals, one of a competitively industrial and commercial sector. Let me commend CZI for consistently providing a platform for dialogue and introspection, and also congratulate them on taking a strategic and policy direction from both a private sector and also bringing in government. As we celebrate the progress made in the manufacturing sector, we celebrate the increased capacity utilization, increased exports, and increased investments, and we remain alive to the challenges experienced by industry. And let me take a little pause on the challenges. We have discussed some of these challenges before, and some of them are to do with the currency situation. And as I've mentioned before, we as the Minister of Industry and Commerce take note of some of these challenges. And it is indeed my role, which I continue to do, to engage and re-engage the private sector while also speaking to my colleagues in the Ministry of Finance and also in the Reserve Bank. And I believe that together, through interrogation and dialogue, we will continue to find solutions to some of these challenges that we experience. Ladies and gentlemen, the keynote in my remarks today is focused on building a resilient and sustainable manufacturing sector. Not only does this allow us to collectively safeguard the progress which has been registered so far, but it also positions the local manufacturers to participate competitively in the global value chains, therefore allowing us, together with CZI, to look at this theme, Glocalize. His Excellency's Vision 2030 of an upper middle class economy is focusing on industrial transformation. In doing so, we are implementing the National Development Strategy 1 so that we strive to attain the aspiration of Vision 2030. The government has put in place various measures to stabilize the economy and to create a conducive business environment. And we do have the facts. This has resulted in the improvement of capacity utilization of the manufacturing sector from 47% in 2020 to 56.25% in 2021, as the President mentioned earlier. Cognizant of the prevailing macroeconomic environment, I'm also told that the manufacturing sector is projected to grow at an average of 3.7% during 2022. And this is on the back of value addition and beneficiation activities in the industrial, mining, and agricultural sectors. There is a policy stance that has been taken by the Second Republic under the stewardship of His Excellency Dr. Mnangagwa. The policy stance is to increase capacity right across the local industries in order to enhance competitiveness in the export market. This has seen significant growth in export proceeds, as shown with an increase from 2.3 billion US in 2021 to 3.5 billion as of June 2022. Government is working on the improvement of key enablers to enhance local production, productivity, and efficiency. And this is very much in line with the ease of doing business. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, it is indeed my pleasure to be here and also to speak about strengthening the relationship between CZI and the government, and to continue this platform of dialogue. With these remarks, I hereby declare the 2022 Confederation of Zimbabwean Industries officially opened. Thank you.
Yes, sure. My name is Alan Musona. I'm the founder of Connect Africa, which is also a subsidiary of Lloyd's Council Partners. First of all, I'll just give you a brief overview of what we're trying to do mainly in Zimbabwe, and just just give you some background, high-level background of our activities on the continent. So we just launched a global B2B network for commerce. So basically what we're trying to do is connect companies to new markets. We also want to digitize and automate supply chains, but most importantly, we've raised some capital to fund B2B trade, mainly targeting importers. So we've just partnered with CZI to launch what we call the Zimbabwe Go Digital program, which is mainly we're coming up with some solutions to see how we can address some of the pain points facing mainly the large importers in the country. So our vision is basically to connect every company in Zimbabwe, and how we manage to do this is we are building technologies to give companies cheaper access to capital, increased efficiency, digital global trade, and access to new markets. So just to make it more interactive, we managed to build a global platform using our technology partner called TradeShift, which is a global B2B company based out of San Francisco. So we have now customized this platform for Africa, and what we've done is we've been onboarding various buyers from multiple countries.
Your Excellency, Dr. CZI Congress, the President, Madam CEO, the sponsors of this beautiful event, captains of industry, good morning, how are you?
Great.
Good morning, how are you? My name is Kudakwashe Mtenda. I am the founder and the MD of a company called Ngwana Group. Personally, I've been out of the country since 2005. I went to school in Japan, and then actually, if you allow me, when I was in Japan in 2011, that's the first time I met Dr. Nzenza for TICAD 4 conference. And then back then I was still a student. And he said, you must come back to Zimbabwe and live this dream. And Madam, well, at least the belly has grown a little bit bigger. Yes, and then after school, went to work. I worked for Mitsubishi. I worked for Daimler. I was working in Brazil, India, Germany, South Africa, and Nairobi. Then I came back to Zimbabwe. So right now, what we're doing in Zimbabwe is that this comes from the realization of 15 years of working in the automotive industry. This comes from the fact that no country can become sustainable without an automotive industry. Not just selling, but local manufacturing. Look at the UK, look at America, look at Japan, look at Korea, look at China, look at India. Any country that is significant because it's coming from the automotive industry. Why is that so? This is because the automotive industry affects every part of our life. That's why we are so much engaged in production of spare parts in Zimbabwe. Not as an end game, but as an anti-measure for making vehicles in Zimbabwe. And thank you. And right now, what impressed me the most is that my brothers from Rwanda and my sisters from Rwanda, they came to our stand and then they were asking us, are these being made in Zimbabwe? Are you sure this is made in Zimbabwe? Like, yes, it's beautiful, it's made in Zimbabwe, by Zimbabweans, for Africa and beyond. And also, as Zimbabweans who are very proud, we are 100% convinced that by making good things in Zimbabwe, that we export to the outer world, that brings respect to Zimbabwe. I don't know if the Japanese ambassador is still here, but a very important saying in Japan that says, monozukuri wa kunizukuri. Making things, in English, is making things makes a country. And that making of a country makes the country very proud. And us as one group, we're making beautiful products that whenever someone sees them, they ask, is this made in Zimbabwe? Yes, it's made in Zimbabwe, by Zimbabweans, for Africa and beyond. And last but not least, Madam, thank you very much for giving us a beautiful platform in Zimbabwe to start a new business, to grow a new business, to explore new markets in Zimbabwe. And I think we're a very good story. We are not in any way connected to anyone, do not know anyone big. Actually, I've never had to look for her because already the environment is so conducive for me to make my filters, for me to sell them all over Zimbabwe, and hopefully sometime next year to sell them to Zimbabwe, starting in Rwanda. Thank you, Madam.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My task is very simple, and I'm not going to make a presentation, but I just need to talk to you. And I was very happy when I was listening to the gentleman from Wana and also from other colleagues. And the gentleman from Refe, he may not remember me, but I think we have had a discussion, especially during this year, in terms of the challenges which he faces, in his sector. Basically, my talking to you is very simple. I want to present to you a very interesting and insightful research paper which we did, during the COVID era, and which we published together with South Korean Korea Institute of Economic and Trade, which is called KIAT. And this is the document. Some of you may not be able to see it, but we have shared the document with our colleagues in CZI. And our hope is that this document is going to do three key issues. The first issue is that it's going to unpack the theory, the concept, and also the best practices in terms of the industrialization agenda, not only in Zimbabwe but beyond. And also that it will also unpack what we call inclusive and sustainable industrial development agenda, which UNIDO as a UN agency does promote. And this agenda itself is part and parcel of the SDGs. And I think most of you are aware of the 17 SDGs which the UN is pushing forward together with the member states, including Zimbabwe. And in particular, SDG 9, which talks about the industrialization and also the infrastructure issues which are pertinent to support economic growth and development. And some of you as industrialists, you may also understand and also appreciate the history behind economic growth, that the world has gone through 4 industrial revolutions. The first one, of course, which started in England and Europe in the 1800s, followed by another one in the US in the early 1900s, and the third one in Korea, South Korea and Japan post the Second World War, right now we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. Some of them call it Industry 4.0. And these are very pertinent issues which I think we as industrialists need to understand and really contextualize and internalize. The other issue which I wanted to kind of share with you is that this research paper, which took us about 2 years, really it goes back in the memory lane. We started looking at two very interesting countries. One an African country, which is called Zimbabwe, which is very rich in natural resources, and which was a former colony of the UK. And on the other side, we looked at South Korea, a poor country in terms of natural resources, and which was also a former colony of Japan. And we looked back from 1970 up to 2021 to see how the industrial development agenda did happen in those two countries. Lastly but not least, I think the other issues which are coming out from this research is on the issue of thought leadership in terms of the economic development agenda, issues to do with the capacity, and issues of trying to encourage government of Zimbabwe really to engage, development partners to make sure that the development, economic growth agenda is now, embedded in the agenda of the development partners. Because if you look at Zimbabwe, mostly development partners or donors are focusing on humanitarian, health, and also on the gender and the democracy and governance issues. But the economic growth agenda is missing. So I think it's up to government of Zimbabwe to push that agenda on the table and engage partners. Thank you so much for this. And I want to submit these two documents to CZI for their consumption.
And let me say all protocol observed. And let me also say that, so that I don't land CZI in the soup, all the views which I'll express today are my own views, not the official position of CZI. I think we can beam the presentation. Right, so we've been through a remarkable stabilization in the last few weeks. We've seen, in terms of the exchange rate, an immediate stabilization of the parallel rate and a convergence of the official rate towards the parallel rate. So this gives us a golden opportunity to turn around our fortunes. The question is, will we take it? Right, so high inflation is our biggest challenge by far. In the past, we've had a tendency of sacrificing monetary stability because we think it's okay to create money to finance production. The challenge is that the inflation impact of money creation is instant. The boosted production is a lagged effect. It takes months, if not years, to actually get the benefits. So that's why we've been in this country in a vicious circle of creating money to fund production because we want production, and we create inflation, and then we buy the products. For example, if we talk agriculture, we fund agriculture, we then create inflation, we buy the products at excessive price, we create more money for that. That means that the farmers don't have enough money to plant again the next season, and it's a never-ending cycle. And it hurts the most vulnerable. So if you look at it from a political perspective, which would you rather have? Okay, if you are an ordinary citizen, would you rather have stable prices and have a little bit less infrastructure development? A little bit less of financing for agriculture so that your prices as an individual are stable? Or would you rather be able to say, oh, well, we've got some new roads, but you're suffering on a daily basis because prices are going up? So that's a key political question. Now, it's often been said, inflation is a monetary phenomenon. That's not quite true at low levels of inflation, because there can be other factors which drive it. But at the kind of inflation that we are talking about, the highest in the world at the moment, by the way, it's exclusively a monetary phenomenon. And you'll notice on the graph here, there's the parallel exchange rate and broad money. And at the bottom there, you can barely see the line, is reserve money, which is our official target. So you can see that we've met our official targets. So if the president looks at this, he says, well, we're hitting our reserve money targets. Why is inflation going through the roof? Oh, it's the greedy businessmen. But in fact, it's the money supply. And what's the disconnect? So in the financial system, there are many what you would call quasi-reserve money instruments, which are being used to quote-unquote mop up liquidity. But they don't actually take money out of the system in a sustainable way. And that's why you've got your broad money just skyrocketing. So what are some of the sources of money supply growth? Let's start with surrender. It's already a topical issue. I know a number of people have already referred to the negative impact of surrender on exporter viability. But think about it. We've had an export boom. I mean, the minister said our exports 2.1 billion up to 2.3 billion up to 3.5 billion. 40% of that, on a lot of those categories, 40% is bought by the RBZ at the official exchange rate. Where does the RBZ get the money to pay for that, right? We know that whilst exports have risen, what's happened to auction allocations, which is part of the source of funds for the RBZ, because they're theoretically supposed to sell a big chunk of that surrender onto the auction. Auction allocations have actually fallen this year. Exports have risen. How is that gap being funded? We've also had an auction backlog where people have been awarded forex at much lower exchange rate, now getting paid out. How is that being funded? Then there's also loans to state enterprises. If you look on the Reserve Bank's balance sheet, loans to state enterprises have been on a strong upward trend. And then, of course, as private sector, until recently, made a lot of sense to try and borrow as much as you can. So you also have private sector credit creation. And then the famous payments to government contractors. So obviously, those payments have stopped temporarily, and that's what's driven this stabilization that we've seen. Will we take advantage of this opportunity and transform our fortunes? Keep money tight, sort out the exchange rate? Or will we go back to our old ways, maybe a little bit more careful about how we pay people, but not fundamentally deal with the issues? Thank you.
Okay. If we look at NDS 1, according to the Minister of Finance and Development, they came up with what they call NDS 1 Program and Project Investment Plan. According to their estimates, we require about 40 billion to fully finance the NDS 1 agenda. And if that graph that you are seeing there is just showing a distribution of this 40 billion across the NDS 1 plan period. It's showing that in 2021 we should have at least raised 4.1 United States of America dollars to finance NDS 1 programs. I think the main point from here is that this is not going to be easy. This is going to be a very tall order. these are the government estimates, and if we fail to raise these resources, it also means that some of the programs and projects under NDS1 are already off track. This is NDS1 in total, but under NDS1, there is a program called Value Chains and Structural Transformation. This one requires about $3 billion United States dollars to finance. And if you look at the distribution of this $3 billion, which by the way constitutes about 7.5% of the total envelope across the NDS1 plan period, you see that in 2021, last year, we should have actually managed to unlock about 44.8%, close to half of the 3 billion, already about 1 billions, to finance value chain and structural transformation. Which again, I think we all agree with me that that never happened because we are already in 2022 and we know that there's no such, industry never got such resources to finance industrial transformation. So again, this also emphasizes that when we talk about structural transformation, especially on value chains, we're talking about money and quite a lot of it.
I would want to introduce our guest of honor. Our guest of honor is a professor of economics. He did his PhD. I don't know what it was called, but it's something mathematical, something. So I think you can be as detailed as you can in your questions or contributions. You will understand everything. He has worked all over the world. He has lectured at UCT at some stage. Yes, at BITS. So he knows the academia. He has also established businesses. So he needs no introduction. Our Minister of Finance, Professor Mkulu, I invite you to give your address.
So for the year end of this year, we're expecting global growth of 3.2, up from 6.1% last year. So you can see we're basically going to have GDP growth this year due to some of the challenges. We have seen, for example, in the US, UK, and everywhere, inflation at easily, 40-year high, something that we haven't seen in 40 years. But there's a chart on inflation coming up in a minute. So in 2023, we expect latest July forecast is that 2023 growth will be 2.9%, and we need to really keep an eye on that, because any further drop in global GDP means that commodity prices that matter to us will be impacted. We really have to watch a growth in China especially. So I see that for 2022 we're looking at Chinese growth at about 3.3%, and then in 2023 slightly higher at 4.6%. So it's okay. But the engine of growth for the world in terms of the large economies is India. So we expect India to grow at about 7.4% this year. In 2023, 6.9%. So ballpark 7%. So that's good. That's a good story for commodities. It's a good story for gold. And with gold, it works this way. They say whenever you hear some noise, sound of a gun, blood in the street, don't think buy gold. So it's an uncertainty protector. But at the same time, if there's demand from countries such as India, because they are growing, they consume a lot of gold. That's really pleasing for that sector. Coming closer home, Sub-Saharan Africa, we expect growth this year to about 3.8% and then 4% into 2023. In some of the countries, Nigeria growing at 3.4% this year and 3.2% next year. South Africa at 2.3% this year and 1.4% next year. Zimbabwe this year, growth is at 4.6%. I've just taken it down in the midterm budget review from 5.5% to 4.6%. The reason being, I'll come to it in more detail. It had to do with agriculture in the main and some other factors which I'll come back to. Next year we expect growth to be in a similar ballpark. We have 5% at the moment, but also we'll watch the global situation and see if we still want to maintain that 5%. Every 6 months we might have to reconsider things. So basically, tight monetary policy in the US, reduced purchasing power globally, and also the issues in China around COVID lockdowns, real estate sector crisis, and obviously geopolitical tensions, all are weighing down on the prospects for the global economy. Next slide, please. But on global inflation, colleagues, is on the up, and this is not nice. So we've got inflation really operating through three channels, including via fuel and fertilizer. We call them the three F's: food, fuel, fertilizer. Those are the three characterize the nature of the global strain that we're currently facing. So energy prices are overall up, and you know what we've been doing locally. We've been using the fuel levy to manage the uptick in prices for diesel and petrol. As of this week, we have reduced the levy on fuel on diesel to 0 cents. You know, our maximum is 12.7 cents a liter. We've taken it down to 0 cents, but on petrol is still 8.7 cents. The blending that we're doing is very helpful. Now at sort of E20, 20% blending on petrol front. So that's been positive for us. We're not importing the blend is locally produced, and that's the idea. So it's really working for us. So again, going back globally, we expect inflation to be of the order of 6.6% into the year end. But we think that in developing economies this year, it will be as high as 8.2%. So generally, we are in a high inflation environment, highest inflation in 40 years, and we're importing that inflation in Zimbabwe. Up to 60% of our inflation locally is imported through various channels: food, fuel, fertilizer, and other supply chain issues that are needed for our industry to move forward. So just looking at our GDP growth, back to that, as I said, for 2022, I'm taking it down to 4.6%. And for next year, we'll again watch the space. So I predicted that back in 2019, that we're likely to go into this U-shape scenario in terms of growth. And that's what has panned out. You can see the bottom of the U for 2019, 2020, when we had negative growth rates. 2019 was mainly that nasty drought situation which affected power supply, lots of power cuts, industry affected, mining was affected. And then 2020, we really went into top gear with COVID. That was the situation. But we're out of it last year with growth of 7.8% as of now. We're actually fine-tuning that. And in this year, 4.6%, and then next year, 5%. So that U-shape is what we're going through now, or what we've gone through. Next slide, please. So going into some of the sectors, in the mining sector, again, we are pleased with the performance so far. The sector grew by 32%. Some numbers I won't even mention them in the first quarter, and we're expecting this production to hold until year end, and again into next year. We expect this sector to record a growth rate of about between 6 and 7%, but we will watch the space, as I say. Gold exports have also benefited from higher global prices. I'm also pleased with the development in South Africa, where the VAT rebate on gold has been removed, because that was leading to some of the leakages that we're seeing from our small-scale producers into South Africa. So that's going to help in closing that gap. So far we've seen an increase in deliveries to Fidelity refineries from almost 15,000 kilograms in the first half of 2022 compared to about 10,000 kilograms for the same period last year. So we've seen that increase from 10,000 to 15,000, 50% increase, and that is pleasing. That is pleasing. So So we expect this to hold. Turning to manufacturing, this is really a capacity utilization story. And most of you here are manufacturers. We're pleased with what we're seeing. Capacity utilization up to order of 57% and up from 47% in 2021 on average. And we're seeing an increase in domestically manufactured goods, the innovative products I was talking about from Dairy Board and other Clayton and other producers and entrepreneurs. That is pleasing indeed, and we as government are committed to supporting the value chain. So you can see the dip in capacity utilization in 2019, and again that U-shape is being affirmed, but now we expect that capacity utilization to remain at that level. And please tell us what we need to do to keep it at above 57% for the next 3-4 years going forward, and never for it to drop below that. So let us know what we need to do as government to support you to stay keep that level of productivity. And I want to turn to some external issues. We have to watch the state of the sort of external balance because whenever we're in negative territory when it comes to the current account, we worry about the impact of that on the currency and currency stability. So far, so good in terms of this variable. So what we're saying is the current account balance, it did widen a surplus of $340.5 million in the first half of 2022 compared to $97.2 million last year, same period. So this is good. This is a good sign. So we know that the external balance position is not a risk to the currency. The risk to the currency is other factors, but not this one. So the surplus continues to be driven by strong inflows in terms of the diaspora inflows. There's also some growth in exports. So everything is firing, but the remittances are a big part of the story. Last year, with remittances of about 1.4 billion. This year, we expect to get to about 1.6 billion US dollars. So that's very good. We're very, very happy with that. That augurs well for currency stability. Of course, we have to deal with other issues around currency stability. In terms of the state of government finances, again, I'm pleased that the position is sound. That will be the first 7 months of the year. Our revenues are about 782.8 billion Zimbabwe dollars against expenditure of 727.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars. So with a small deficit of 44.7 billion dollars, and that's a very small deficit indeed of in the first half of less than 0.5%. So we are very comfortable. Our target for the year is a budget deficit of 1.5% of GDP. So we're well within that. I don't see, basically I don't foresee any fiscal risks to economic stability in terms of the deficit, over borrowing and so forth. Well, one challenge we face, of course, is overpricing by some of our suppliers, but I think we are working very well with them to make sure they understand the concept of value for money, and that we ought to price things reasonably, so that I don't have to keep going back to Parliament for supplementary budgets and so forth, because our expenses have run away because we've been overcharged. So things are sound. I'm very happy with that. Coming to inflation, I am less happy that we've seen the inflationary pressures. Of course, part of the inflation is imported, part of it is locally generated, and together it makes for a not so nice cocktail. So we saw inflation accelerate from about 61% in January to 285% in August. Well, our expectation is that, as government, is that inflation on a year-on-year basis will tick up in September, maybe even into October, but on a month-on-month, it will fall very fast to single digit. In fact, our expectation for September is a month-on-month inflation of the order of 9%, and by year end, we should be at about 3%, single digit. But the year-on-year stays high. It's basically a base effect. If you understand how annual inflation is calculated on the back of the CPI index, the base last year was low, and once you have a shift at some point in the year upwards, that base effect is maintained and inflation stays high, not because things are rising fast. None of that. It's just a statistical issue in terms of So, but look, we still accept that there are inflation risks out there, even though we have a forecast that month on month it will fall, but this still exists in terms of the global situation, in terms of potential currency volatility, which has been a big driver domestically, inflation. But the trend is downwards. That is what we expect. Next slide. On the exchange rate, we have seen in the first half of the year a weakening of our exchange rate, also an opening up of the gap between the power rate and the official rate. But of course, in the last few weeks, we've seen that gap close, and the power rate also flatten and beginning to come down. And we've seen the impact of that on prices. Some of the retailers have been reducing prices. And that is positive. So the gap is narrowing. There seems to be some stability, because what we really want here is not so much to eliminate the gap, which would be a good thing if we did, but rather we want a stable gap that doesn't increase, because once it starts increasing, that creates a lot of challenges for us in terms of impact of inflation. Next slide, please. Some of the policies that we've enacted, as you know, we put together a cocktail of measures, both on the monetary and fiscal and front. On the monetary front, we've tightened monetary policy by reducing the target for M0 growth to 0% to year end. We've also tightened on the growth of M3 broad money by in two ways: by increasing borrowing interest rate. We moved the policy rate to 200%, and then on the government front, we're basically trying to make sure that we insist on value for money for government contractors. All that goes a long way to managing the growth of M3 broad money, or indeed credit extension in general. When you raise interest rates, that impacts those companies or entities that will borrow from the banks. But those who have contracts with government, they are not affected by interest rates. We're just paying for the services, of course. They're not impacted by that. So we need to implement other measures to manage the runaway expenditure from contractors, and we'll be doing that through the value for money process. So monetary measures, fiscal measures is what we've introduced to deal with excess liquidity and excessive growth in liquidity. We also introduced gold coins to do two things: to offer investors, individuals, with an alternative to holding the US dollar or indeed the Zim dollar. It's up to them. If they wish to store value in gold, it's up to them. You can invest in a gold coin. But also it's a way of managing liquidity as well. So it's doing both things. It's an investment alternative, but as well as a source of a way to control our liquidity. Some employment data for what it's worth. We're looking at so we've got employment to population ratio, and then it's by province. So just comparing the first quarter of 2022 to the fourth quarter of 2021. So what are we seeing? Maybe let's start with the far end. We see that there's been a slight increase in employment. Basically 33.9 to 35.3 in terms of that ratio, an increase there of 1.4, and then that's the percentage change, 1.4% increase in employment levels. Looking at the various provinces, I'm trying to see which province did best here. I think it's Mashonaland West, where we've got a growth rate of 6.6% in employment, and this is largely in the agricultural sector. Here's the next one. I think Nikaland at 2.7%. Then Mashonaland Central 2%. Then Mash East 1.8, Midlands at 1.3, where are the negative ones? Mark North negative 2.6%. Masingo negative as well, Harare negative. But these are just some of the figures, colleagues, in terms of the first quarter labor for survey from Zimstat, showing an average of 1.4% employment increase nationally, but it varies by region. And it's clear that agriculture is driving quite a bit of this employment growth. Looking at the key agricultural regions or provinces of the country, such as Marsh West, Marsh East. Next slide, please. Next slide. Here, colleagues, just some results from a study that actually what we did with CZI. In fact, I found out that I asked my staff in Treasury to do some work on product complexity. In fact, I announced it last year that we were going to do something. Only to find that Macheza had already also initiated a similar study. So we then joined forces and produced some results, and I'm sure these were presented, I think, at the local conference in Falls, and maybe, I don't know whether in this conference it was done. But here's the story, colleagues. What we are finding is that over time, we have become less and less diverse in our product range as a country, and that's not a good thing. But I'm pleased with what I saw outside, that more products are coming. Maybe this will improve. So the economists come up with very complex things. There's something called the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, HHI, which measures the degree of concentration, and we use this to track whether there's better product diversity or not. And lo and behold, if you there's that red line, it shows that the HHI concentration index is increasing, and that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. So for instance, in 1995, we see that the top 5 exports accounted for 40% of total exports, right? And then in 2020, the top 5 exports accounted for 78% of total exports. So clearly, this is going the wrong way. We would like to see more or greater product diversity, but also we want to see those products going to a wider range of countries. You can see in 1995, we had our products going to 28 countries. Now our most important products are going to only 5 countries. So clearly, we need to do something about this. Next slide, please. I think just additional information on the HHI, just showing where we sit relative to other countries. So we've got, where are we? So the best country looks like what? It's Namibia. Now, and that's where we were in 1995, followed by Kenya, Togo, and on that list, you've got Zimbabwe, at the same level as Central African Republic, all the way down Nigeria, Botswana, Guinea-Bissau, Sudan are at the bottom of the pile. So next slide, please. This is just further information on the concentration of exports. Looking at that red line, which is our mineral exports, that they dominate the export picture. 70% of Zimbabwe's exports are minerals. Only 30% is then manufactured products or agricultural products. So clearly, we need this to change. We need to see the graph for manufactured products begin to turn up. At the moment, it's going the wrong way, which is down. We measure the complexity of an economy by the quality, breadth, and depth, and width of these manufactured products, and not its mining mineral products, especially when there's no or very little beneficiation. Next slide, please. This is again economic further analysis on the economic transformation or complexity. And here we're looking at the UAE. For the UAE in 1991, 84% of the products were from just 85% of exports were just 5 primary products. Currently, 60% is from 5 processed and primary product. So we can see that there's been a change even in a country such as UAE, and we ought to watch that and learn from that. We should be following suit. Next slide, please. Now let me talk a bit about the financial sector support for industry. Colleagues, this year we're going to draw down and 35 million and 10 million will be spent on supporting the health sector and the education sector respectively. On the agricultural sector support, we've already launched the revolving fund for horticulture for about 30 million. We launched it last week with the Minister of Agriculture. And then we have an industry support fund of about $15 million, which we will launch in the next few weeks. We're just finalizing a few things in terms of the structure of that fund. Is coming. It's a retooling fund. It's a revolving fund. We'll give a cash guarantee to participating banks, and then companies can then borrow from those banks. This will be a far better arrangement than the stimulus package where we extended just a mere government guarantee. This time is cash in the bank. So banks have no excuse for not lending those resources at a subsidized interest rate. So this is the only way. Watch the space. I hope some of you will come forward and borrow. And then we're also going to support infrastructure development, housing, with a fund of $10 million, and we'll support the development of gold centers with again with a fund of $10 million. So total 145. But for industrialists, I guess what's key here is the 15 million for retooling. Next slide, please. I've said a lot about the horticulture fund. For what it's worth, just go back. The participating banks are FBC, NMB, CABS, AFC. So if you're in horticulture, you're keen to borrow, please contact these banks. They should be able to assist you. Next slide, please. Well, we have to, we're not an island. We have to, our first market around us as a country is region. So please, let's take advantage of that. We've also the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, which is unleashing a bigger market. And it is my hope that as the industry will take advantage of your proximity within the region, within Africa, your positioning to grow your markets. Go ahead. Well, for us as government, we are committed to maintaining macroeconomic stability. Sometimes it's never easy, but we're committed to that, and we'll do everything to make sure that is the case by managing fiscal space in terms of fiscal restraint. On the monetary front, we'll make sure that we keep a tight lead on liquidity to make sure that money supply growth is constrained, both in terms of M0 and M3 growth. And then we'll also make sure that we put in the right incentives to support you as a manufacturing sector so that you can improve your product complexity and diversify your product mix. Next slide, please. Just on product complexity, for what it's worth, we have got a four-quadrant chart here which shows the basically, we are comparing what we call ubiquity versus complexity of a product, the quality of innovation or knowledge in a product versus the rawness in a product, which is basically a ubiquity factor. Things like platinum, hides, doors, and billiards fall into what you call the high complexity but low ubiquity space. And then you've got things like that are low complexity, low ubiquity, and you can see most of the minerals fall into that place. And then at the extreme end, where they've higher complexity and also higher ubiquity, here we've got shaped sections, alloy steels, angles, steel products, barbed wire, low complexity, but high ubiquity is tobacco, linseed, zoology, and so forth. So basically, we can classify most of our products onto a map of either ubiquity or rather a combination of ubiquity and complexity. And what we want to do as a country is to move to the top quadrant, top right-hand quadrant. That's where we want to be. as we improve the complexity of our products. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. This is much appreciated. And I affirm government's commitment to supporting industry, keeping the environment stable, giving you the right incentives. I thank you very much.